What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to discuss even more new iOS 18.1 features and changes, along with the major confusion that came from Apple Intelligence. We're also going to discuss the new iOS 18.2 beta features and changes. We're going to talk about the new M4 Max that Apple released this week, Apple's latest acquisition, a crazy AirTag story, and more. And as always, if you want to stay updated with everything going on in the world of Apple, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And also check out the Apple Den newsletter if you like reading the latest that's going on in the world of Apple. Okay, so this week was absolutely massive for Apple. Like, not just the new Mac announcements, but also the fact that we got iOS 18.1, which came with Apple Intelligence. So pretty much everybody out there, aside from us small percentage of beta testers, were able to access Apple Intelligence for the very first time ever. So that was a big deal. However, it was met with a lot of negativity because of the waitlist that was included after updating to 18.1. And I believe a lot of people were negative about this, even though it only took like less than 10 minutes for more than 50% of people. I actually did a poll on Twitter or X about this, and most people it took under 10 minutes to get access. So this was really blown out of proportion, and I think a lot of people didn't understand exactly why there was a wait list. So to help you understand exactly why the wait list even existed in the first place, here's some insight from a non-Apple server engineer. The real cause is almost certainly enrolling you in a private cloud compute. That's the server side of Apple Intelligence. Some of your requests are handled locally, while more complex ones are sent to the cloud. This is illustrated in Apple's public documentation of PCC, which I will leave linked in the description. So this is a real butt cheek clenching day for Apple server engineers, finally rolling out this brand new cloud system at planet scale and taking on production traffic. They're probably limiting the number of people they let in the door so they can ensure it scales healthily. Less likely but possible is that there is some delay related to the initial authentication process your device has to go through, called the PCC Identity Service. We don't know exactly what anti-fraud measures it takes, but it's possible there is some dependency on a third party, like verifying your carrier details. This is also likely cause of any rejections from the waitlist. So I thought that was an excellent write-up and really explains exactly why there was a waitlist in the first place, because obviously Apple has the capacity to roll this out to everybody at the same time. But if we learned anything from the CrowdStrike fiasco a few months back, you would know that it's not a good idea to just roll out software unless it's like, tried and true, like Apple software with the software updates. Most of the time, most tech companies, not just Apple, roll out software gradually to only a certain percentage of people at a time, and it continues just to make sure there are no issues. And that was really what was going on here with Apple Intelligence. Like, think about it. This is the first time ever that Apple has opened this up to the public. So it's a big deal, and a lot of things could have gone wrong. So it would be a big deal, big, headline, negative headline for Apple if they released it to everybody at one time and there was a major issue that just caused everybody to not be able to use their Apple Intelligence features after waiting on them for so long. And here's another big misconception. A lot of people think that Apple's private cloud compute is not active yet, or that it's just not working yet, and that's only being used for ChatGPT. Well, that's not the case, because if you put your phone in airplane mode and you go into writing tools, you'll see that not every writing tool is available unless you're connected to the internet, which likely implies that it is using Apple's private cloud compute for some of these features that are even in iOS 18.1. So yes, Apple's private cloud compute is going to be used a lot more extensively in future versions, when it comes to ChatGPT integration and things like that, but it's still being used here in iOS 18.1. So hopefully that helps you understand better what's going on with Apple Intelligence on iOS 18.1. And I will leave all Apple's PCC documentation down in the description below as well. So this gets pretty advanced. It's beyond, a lot of the stuff that I know. That's why I rely on a lot of people that are smarter than me in that field to bring you guys the best information. So I'll link all my sources in the description below. Anyway, so the Apple Intelligence waitlist was really nothing. It took most people less than 10 minutes to get in. However, the same cannot be said for the Image Playground waitlist or the Genmoji waitlist, because now, as of the time of recording this, there are still many people that do not have access to Genmoji and Image Playground, even though they have access to Apple Intelligence, because again, this was a separate waitlist. And of course, that makes sense because 18.2 has a lot more advanced generative features than 18.1 had, like the ChatGPT integration, obviously creating the Genmojis and the images and Image Playground. That takes a lot more. And of course, we're still on beta 1. So, you can't really expect the waitlist to go as quick as it did for Apple Intelligence. And we also saw that from Craig Federighi here. So he did actually send an email to somebody saying that these features are going to be rolling out over the next few weeks. I will say though, Image Playground is so fun. I've used this for like everybody in my camera roll at this point. Anybody I have a photo of in my camera roll, I will go in here and just make different variations of them. Like that's what I like doing in my off time and just trying to learn the application. It is so fun and so addicting, especially when you can describe an image. And if you want to add something custom that's not in there, you can do that. Like if I want to add a cowboy hat, I'll just add cowboy hat. And there you go. You can see it puts a cowboy hat on my head. And again, I've said this before, but Image Playground and Genmoji is so scarily accurate. It's insane. Like I've done this for probably 25 people in my camera roll, and every single one of them looks almost exactly like them. Like the face structure, the teeth, the smile, the hair is the only thing that's a little bit off, I've noticed. But as far as the overall face structure, it is so spot on. It's wild. And I think one of the most underrated features in iOS 18.2 when it comes to Apple Intelligence is the image wand feature. So if you go to your tool here, and I just have a story written out here, but if I just draw a circle here, it will actually create an image based on what I said. So it says language not supported for some reason. Let me just make it, maybe get rid of these numbers. Now let's try that again. Let's just draw a circle down here and see if it's able to come up with that. Okay, so there we go. So you do have to kind of play around with it, and it does say Apple, stay hungry, and inspiration. That's what it picked up on from what it read above. So it's just really cool because you're not actually telling Apple Intelligence to like read something. You're not selecting the text or anything. You're just drawing a simple circle at the bottom of a long paragraph of text, and it creates an image based on that for you. So I just think it's super cool. I've done this for multiple different stories, and I just think it's awesome. And then also visual intelligence for the iPhone 16 series is amazing. Like, yes, this is pretty much just Google Lens rewrapped for Apple, but I actually use this in the real world multiple times. And I did screen record this before. So I was in Orlando, and you could see I couldn't remember this guy's name. So let me just tell you the context here. I couldn't remember the names of this guy in the gray sweater there. I couldn't remember his name in Despicable Me. So I figured I'd use visual intelligence to, tell me the answer to that. So from here, I can of course search, or of course I can use ChatGPT. And I noticed that when I searched, it just showed me images of that, and I didn't really get the answer I was looking for. So what I decided to do was use ChatGPT to ask what it sees on the screen. And you'll notice that it actually says the name of the guy right here, which is Guru. So it gave me the answer using visual intelligence when I didn't want to type it in Google and find the answer. And I didn't really know what to search for. And of course, again, I've said this before, so I'm not going to keep repeating myself, but the ChatGPT integration with iOS 18.2 is such a massive deal that I don't think anybody realizes how big of a deal this is going to be. Like, as long as you say ask ChatGPT in your query to Siri, it will automatically ask ChatGPT, which is great because I was cooking something and I didn't know for sure if olive oil was considered a neutral oil. So I asked, of course, Siri wouldn't be able to tell me that. It's not, it's not as advanced as that. It would just send me to the web results, but I wanted an answer right away and specifics about that answer as well, not just a yes or no. So I made sure to ask, include ask ChatGPT in my query, and it gave me this answer right over top of, this video I was watching right here, and it told me no, and it told me, why. Now, also, if we go into Safari, I noticed the change with the cleanup feature, the Thanos snap feature. So if you go right here and you go to hide distracting items, before you had to select something on this current page. Like you just had to select something and you could not scroll. But now with 18.2, you can notice that you will be able to scroll and this interface stays up. So you can scroll down the page and hide certain elements and move at the same time. Before you had to click on done and then go back in there and then scroll and then do it again. So now it's a lot easier to hide distracting items while scrolling through a web page. And then another feature that a lot of people are happy to see has returned is inside of our settings and accessibility. And then scroll down to audio visual. And then down here we have the always show volume control toggle. So that is new with iOS 18.2, and you'll notice that it doesn't happen right away every time. So there we go. I had to do a refresh twice on the lock screen, but now it will show our volume slider there at all times. Now, I've also had a few people ask me about writing tools in third-party applications. And what I'll tell you is that almost every third-party application does give you access to writing tools. However, some of Meta's applications, it seems like they block access to writing tools. Now, I don't know if that's for sure or if they just need an update to the application, but what I can tell you is that in iOS 18.2 beta 1, writing tools do work in every application I've tried, including in WhatsApp right here. So if we go into WhatsApp and then swipe over, you can see all the way to the end here, we do have writing tools, and it functions just fine here in WhatsApp on iOS 18.2. However, I did try this on 18.1 and it was not working. So if you're having issues in any of Meta's applications specifically on 18.1, just know that it's not just you, like it is seemingly broken for those applications, but for most other applications, every application actually that I've tried, Writing Tools has worked just fine. And here in 18.2, it works even in the Meta applications. Now, I did also want to point out that if you live in the EU, Apple did confirm that Apple Intelligence is coming in April of 2025. So of course, as of now, only Mac users on macOS 15.1 in the EU when you're using US English as your language, but it's not going to be on iOS and iPadOS until April. And Apple also said that in December with iOS 18.2, Apple Intelligence is going to be available for localized English in Australia, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, South Africa, and the UK. So that is excellent news for those that are outside of the US. You will be getting access to Apple Intelligence very soon. Now, as far as the performance and the battery life goes, the performance on iOS 18.1 is pretty solid. Like I did have one random respring this week after the final release on Monday, which is quite odd. That doesn't typically happen with final releases, but it wasn't bad. It was just a quick respring. But aside from that, performance has been great. All my applications work fine, no crashes in applications or anything like that. And honestly, Apple Intelligence has been extremely stable. Like I've had no issues with Writing Tools breaking or, the menus being just clear and not being able to see Writing Tools at all. Everything has worked fine for me with 18.1 when it comes to the performance. And then when it comes to battery life on iOS 18.1, I've also had a great experience with battery life as well. So I'm using 18.2 on my main device here, but I do have a device on 18.1 that I use a few times a week as well. And battery life, of course, has been great. Ever since the RC version, it has been great and better than 18.0. But when it comes to iOS 18.2 beta 1, I don't think the battery life or the performance are very good. So as far as performance goes, I have at least like 3 to 4 resprings per week. Obviously, this hasn't been out for very long, just a couple of weeks, but I still have had a few resprings, and it happens a lot in the Image Playground application, I've noticed. And also my phone does get very warm when I'm in Image Playground. Like I understand it takes a lot of compute to be able to make those images and everything, but I should not feel as much heat as I'm feeling from that application. Now, obviously that's going to get better with time, but overall performance on 18.2 beta 1 is just not great. And of course, because of the resprings and because of the heat, the battery life is also not the best. So if I go back to my settings here and I go down to my battery, you can see what my battery life is looking like. And it's not the best. Like it's not terrible. I have had worse, but it's just not great. I think the 18.1 is far and away better when it comes to battery life. Now, as far as what to expect next from Apple, next up is going to be most likely iOS 18.2 beta 2. Now, of course, we did not get a software update this week for iOS 18.2 as expected. I mentioned that in my original What's New video and also last week's Apple Weekly that we were not going to see another beta until the week of November 4th, and that seems like it is still likely. Now, we should be seeing that on Monday, November 4th. Of course, we could see it on the 5th, but that is election day, so Apple is kind of weird when it comes to holidays. So regardless of what day, we should be seeing 18.2 beta 2 next week. And then, of course, we should still be on a 2-week cycle at that point. So after that, we're likely to get beta 3 on the week of the 18th. And of course, the final release for iOS 18.2 is going to come out at some point in December. If I had to guess right now, it would be the week of December 16th. And of course, we could also see an iOS 18.1.1 at some point in November if Apple finds any bug fixes or any security, vulnerabilities that need patched up. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And let's start with the brand new Macs that Apple just announced this week. So Apple kicked off the week on Monday with the announcement of the new iMac. So this has the same 24-inch 4.5K Retina display, but it now has a nano texture glass option for $200. And unfortunately, this is not available on the base model. You have to get the slightly upgraded model to be able to add nano texture glass to that configuration, but it is still nice to see that on the iMac as well. And the best part though is that we have 16 gigs of RAM base now for all the Macs, not just the iMac, but this is big for the iMac. And of course, you can go up to 32 gigs, and it does start at 256 gigs of storage, unfortunately, but you can spec that up to 2 terabytes. It does also include a new 12 megapixel center stage camera with desk view. It has the color matched accessories that include USB-C. So yes, we have USB-C accessories now. Finally, that's the Magic Keyboard, the Magic Trackpad, and of course the Magic Mouse. And this iMac starts at the same $1299 price tag. And then the next day on Tuesday, Apple announced the M4 Mac Mini, and this was undoubtedly the star of the show. So this has a brand new redesign. So it's less than half the size of the previous Mac Mini. It's now 5 by 5 inches. It's like this little tiny adorable cube, and it just looks amazing. So this has the M4 and M4 Pro chip. It has 2 USB-C ports on the front and 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports on the back, whereas the M4 Pro model has Thunderbolt 5 instead of Thunderbolt 4 on the back, which that's pretty big. Also, this was very controversial, but the power button is on the bottom of the Mac Mini, but you don't need to pick it up to power it on or off. And plus, a lot of people are making this into like a huge deal, but the reality is, like, when was the last time you turned off your Mac? Like, obviously a lot of you are going to do that, but for me personally, I haven't turned off my Mac, I don't think, in maybe like 6 months. Maybe, I don't know. I just never turn off my Mac, and I don't think most people should be turning off their Mac very often. But, I just think that was really blown out of proportion because it's not something you're going to do every single day. And most people, you're not going to do it even every week or every month. Anyways, this also starts with 16 gigs of RAM and 256 of storage. And for the M4 Pro, it starts at 24 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage. And as far as the performance goes, it is 1.8 times faster when it comes to CPU performance and 2.2 times faster in GPU performance compared to M1, which is pretty solid. And it does also have a redesigned thermal architecture for better cooling, which will be great for the performance and especially gaming. So this also starts at the same $599 for the M4 and $1399 for the M4 Pro. I just think that this Mac Mini cannot be beat when it comes to value. This is the best value Mac out there by far, especially now that it has that tiny footprint. Like, it's just a little bit bigger than the Apple TV, the latest Apple TV, and that is insane. And then Apple's final announcement of the week was on Wednesday, and this was the M4 MacBook Pro. So it was the M4, M4 Pro, and M4 Max MacBook Pros. Now, of course, the M4 Pro and M4 Max, you can get those in 16-inch variants, whereas the M4 is only for the 14-inch. Now, these all come with a base 16 gigs of RAM for the M4, that is. The M4 Pro comes with a base of 24 gigs of RAM, and the M4 Max comes with a base of 36 gigs of RAM. We also have 1000 nits of standard brightness compared to 600 on the M3, which is a big deal. It also has a nano texture display, so you can get the nano texture display on the MacBook as well, which to me, that's a big deal as somebody who works outside often, like multiple times a week here in Florida where the sun is beating down. So nano texture on the MacBook is a must buy for me personally, especially since it's only $150. It's not $200 like on the iMac. We have 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports for the M4, which is Thunderbolt 5 for the M4 Pro and M4 Max. We have 16 to 24 hours of battery life when you're web browsing or video streaming. And the M4, when it comes to the cores, has a 10-core CPU and 10-core GPU, whereas the M4 Pro has a 14-core CPU and a 20-core CPU. And the M4 Max, the behemoth, has a 16-core CPU and a 40-core GPU, which is insane. We also have the space black color available for all models, including the base M4. We have that 12 megapixel center stage camera with desk view. And the best part, of course, as always, is that the prices remain the same. So M4 starts at $1599, M4 Pro at $1999, and M4 Max at $3199. So all of these Macs are currently available for pre-order right now, and they will be released on November 8th, so next Friday. And I'll tell you what, if you have an Intel Mac right now, this is going to be a massive upgrade. So this is going to be the upgrade to go with if you're still on an Intel Mac, and honestly, even an M1. If you have an M1, this is going to be a solid upgrade for any of these, the iMac, the Mac Mini, and the MacBook Pro. I think it's solid for all of them. And I did also want to mention, by the way, that the M2 MacBook Air and the M3 MacBook Air also quietly got bumped to 16 gigs of RAM as well, while retaining the same price. So that's awesome. 16 gigs of RAM across the board for all Mac computers now is amazing. And we did also see some benchmark results from the M4 Pro chip, and it's quite impressive. So the Mac Mini with the M4 Pro with the 14-core CPU scored a 22,094 on the multi-core, whereas the Mac Studio with the the M2 Ultra chip, which has the 24-core CPU, scored less than that. It scored a 21,351. And then the M4 Pro Mac Mini with the 14-core CPU scored a 22,094 compared to the 14-inch MacBook Pro with the M3 Pro chip with the 12-core CPU that scored a 15,282. So I'll tell you what, that M4 Pro chip looks mighty enticing. Of course, the M4 Max is going to blow the M4 Pro out of the water when it comes to benchmarks and of course, really intensive performance, but that M4 Pro looks like the one I will be getting. Also this week, the popular photo editing application Pixelmator got acquired by Apple. So this is a pretty big deal. They do have applications on the Mac, the iPad, and the iPhone. You might have seen or used them. They're pretty awesome, and they will be joining Apple now. So they did say that nothing is going to change, at least not yet, but it is pretty interesting to see, what the future might hold with Apple having this now. Are they going to go after Adobe? And what Adobe's doing with Photoshop, we don't know yet, but this is an interesting move that we'll have to keep an eye on moving forward. Also, GitHub Copilot is now available for Xcode. So if you're a developer, this is nice to have. It is in a public preview right now. So this will add code completions, multi-language support, multi-line suggestions, content filtering, block suggestions, matching public code, and more. Also this week, we saw Apple's Q4 2024 earnings, and this is pretty interesting. So overall, they did beat Wall Street expectations for revenue and for EPS, earnings per share, but profit was down for the quarter because Apple had to make a one-time payment of $10.2 billion with a B to settle tax issues in the EU. And you can see here all of the revenue numbers and what the expectations were. It's really good to see that margins did improve, even though it's just very slightly, but you can see those numbers there, pretty solid. Now we're also hearing once again that all 4 of the upcoming iPhone 17 models are going to include the ProMotion 120Hz display. So this latest report comes from South Korea's ET News. But this is the second time in just like the past couple of months that we've heard this, because before that we saw Ross Young of DSCC, who is a very, accurate leaker when it comes to displays. He also mentioned this. So it looks like the iPhone 17, the iPhone 17 Air, or whatever it ends up being called, and both of the Pros are going to have the 120Hz refresh rate, which will be huge. And then finally, just as tradition, we have another crazy AirTag story. So shout out to a viewer for emailing me this story. Again, I do always take submissions for AirTag stories. So if you have one that you maybe think that I should cover here on the channel, feel free to email it to me or just send it to me on social media. I really appreciate that. So thank you, Kessler. So anyways, this time a woman in Calgary, Canada was running errands near her neighborhood on a Sunday afternoon when she was carjacked by 2 teens who had a knife and demanded her to get out of the car. And she said that as one of the suspects got behind the wheel, she managed to punch him in the back a couple of times through the open window before the two sped off with her Jeep Cherokee. So she of course reported this incident to the police, but hours later, she remembered that she hadn't just lost her Jeep, her purse was also in that car, along with her other family vehicles, keys, and her AirPods. So she grabbed her phone, opened up the Find My application, and was able to get a location on the AirPods, which were inside of the purse inside of the stolen Jeep. So she of course called police, and with the new intel, they did circulate the area where that pinged, but the lady got another ping on Find My about 10 minutes later that showed that the suspects were actually coming towards her house. They were not in that location anymore. And again, the reason they were coming to her house is because these suspects had the keys to the truck that was in her driveway, and that's what they were after. And that's exactly what they did. They drove her stolen Jeep to go steal her truck. So yes, the police confirmed that these 2 suspects were driving separate stolen vehicles together, and they eventually stopped at a gas station, and that's where they were arrested. And their ages, you might wonder, 14 and 17. That's just sad. And they both face multiple charges, including robbery, theft of a motor vehicle, and failure to comply. But once again, without the Find My application and without the, AirTags like features that are built into the AirPods, who knows how this story might have ended. Anyways, that's it for this week. Next week, we have new Macs coming, hopefully a new beta for 18.2, and a lot more, I'm sure, that will be on the horizon as well. So if you're not subscribed already, now is the time to go ahead and get subscribed to the channel, and I'll see you guys next week.